From the beginning, William and Catherine Booth believed in women being fully included in ministry. The Salvation Army is still committed to the equality of men and women in ministry and in all aspects of life. This view wasn't simply practical, it was based on a full reading of Scripture. For example, in the Old Testament, we read about the patriarchs like Abraham, Moses, Isaac, and Jacob. We can also read about women like Miriam, Huldah, and Deborah, who show the same kind of religious authority as those men. Let's look at Deborah in the book of Judges, chapter 4, verses 4 and 5. Now Deborah, a prophet, the wife of Lapidoth, was leading Israel at that time. She held court under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites went up to her to have their disputes decided. Deborah lived at least 1,000 years before Jesus was on earth. She was in charge of the Israelites. Under her rule, there were serious threats from the enemy and war. She called on the military commander to fight the enemy, but the commander wouldn't go without Deborah. Her leadership led to victory for her people. Even without reading the whole story of Deborah, there are some interesting things we learn just in the 2 verses we read. She was married. She was also a prophet. She could be married and in ministry. She also held court, which meant she was a judge or a leader. People came to her for her wisdom. And as a prophet, she was God's spokesperson. This was not a normal role for a judge. This made Deborah's leadership extraordinary. Note what is not in the story of Deborah. There isn't any fuss made over the fact that she was a woman. Her husband didn't say, "You can't be a judge because you are a woman and my wife." The military commander didn't say, "You cannot lead the soldiers because you are a woman." God didn't say, "You cannot speak on my behalf because you're a woman." From what we read, it seems she was known to have God-given qualities, and she used them. In a similar way, the topic of women in ministry in the Salvation Army is less about the outstanding and exceptional and more about the everyday. Because they were created equal, everyday women have the God-given right to spread the gospel. This is largely due to the fact that the Salvation Army was founded by a man and a woman. William Booth once wrote, "Other religious organizations cannot be said to have a mother. Their guides and authorities are all fathers." He was proud that he and Catherine worked side by side in ministry. In fact, William was sometimes sick for long periods of time. On those occasions, Catherine also took over administrative responsibilities. Catherine Booth was a woman who feared the Lord. By the time she was 12 years old, she had read through the entire Bible 8 times. Before she married William, she wrote him letters about what she called her settled views. Because of her time in Scripture, Catherine had strong Bible-based views about holiness and the equality of women before God, including their right to preach the gospel. William agreed. In fact, Catherine became a well-known preacher in her own right. One of the reasons we have so many women in leadership in the Salvation Army is the influence of Catherine Booth. This was abundantly clear in 1934 when Evangeline Booth became the first woman to be elected General of the Salvation Army. Evangeline Booth was the 7th of Catherine and William Booth's 8 children. Educated at home, she started preaching at 15 and was in charge of the Salvation Army in part of London at 17. At 23, she was in charge of the Salvation Army's International Training College at the Commander of the Salvation Army in London. At 31, she became commander of the Salvation Army in Canada. At 39, Evangeline was appointed the commander of the Salvation Army in the United States, where she served for the next 30 years. During those 30 years, Evangeline expanded the social services of the army by establishing hospitals for unwed mothers, soup kitchens, emergency shelters, services for the unemployed, Evangeline residences for working women, homes for the elderly, and prison work. The Army's disaster relief services grew from its response to the San Francisco earthquake and fire of 1906, which killed 3,000 people and left half of the city's population homeless. During World War I, the Donut Girls served soldiers on the front lines. In 1934, at 69, Evangeline became the fourth general and led the Salvation Army's work in 80 countries for 5 years. For those raised in the Salvation Army, it's easy to forget that not everyone thinks the same way we do about women in ministry. We ordain both men and women. We always have. To ordain means to make someone a minister or a pastor with all of the responsibilities and privileges that come with that role. That includes the authority to be in charge of a congregation and to preach. Some other denominations ordain women. Some are still strongly against it. The Salvation Army was one of the earliest denominations to allow women both to preach and to oversee a congregation. In the United States, we are used to women being involved in all aspects of ministry. In many countries, this isn't the norm at all. One important role the Salvation Army has in the world is empowering women, particularly in places where we are still considered property. How we treat women isn't just a women's issue, it's a gospel issue. It shows the world how God views all humans. He creates all humans in His image and equips them for His purposes. Egalitarianism, or gender equality in ministry, is part of our DNA. It's part of who we are. We haven't figured it out perfectly. It's an ongoing process. We haven't fully arrived, but we are making progress.